Welcome to Success Weekly with James Tharris, a weekly dose of thought-provoking ideas and helpful tips on improving your mindset. And now, here's your host, James Tharris.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Success Weekly. I'm your host, James Tharris, and today we're going to be talking about resilience. What is resilience? Well, resilience is basically falling down, getting up again. So in the martial arts, we have a saying in Korean, "Chiljan palgi," which means fall down 7, get up 8. And basically, that's about resilience. We also have another saying in the martial art, or it's part of one of our mental side of the training, which we have the 5 tenets of Taekwondo. The last one is called indomitable spirit, which means obviously having a spirit that cannot be dominated. Again, referring to resilience. So if you're going to become a successful person, you are going to experience failures and setbacks. You're going to experience challenges, and you're going to experience situations that you don't have any experience in, that you're going to have to learn about, which is called the learning curve, and that's all part of becoming successful. A good friend of mine years ago said that basically success comes down to how much crap you can take. And I found that to be absolutely true, so true in my own life. There's a limit to how much crap I can take, and I know where my threshold is, and I can see why that's kept me from being more successful than I am right now. But also, I can also see that if I continue exposing myself to these particular situations, that I'm going to get stronger and I'm going to get wiser as a result, and therefore I'm going to experience more future success. So it's those, what are we afraid of as human beings mostly, besides death and public speaking? We're afraid of change. And so in order to learn how to handle more crap, we have to expect that things are going to change. Technology changes. As a good example, back in the early days of martial arts business, I guess, which really started in the 1960s, and then the 1970s, of course, it became a lot more popular when Bruce Lee came onto the scene, and was in a lot of television shows and things like that. It didn't require a lot of business acumen to really open and run a business, because people were kind of finding us through those other avenues, through Bruce Lee. Any place that taught something that even remotely resembled what he did on screen, well, that was all the marketing a person needed to really have. And then, of course, fast forward into the early 80s when the Karate Kid came out. My goodness, that was like shooting fish in a barrel for martial arts instructors, because everybody, after seeing that movie, which was one of the most popular movies of all time, certainly one of the most popular of the 80s, when that movie hit, almost every parent in the United States went out looking for the closest thing they could find to their own Mr. Miyagi. And so the movies, and of course the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Three Ninjas and all these types of movies that help to perpetuate marketing and a mindset, an awareness of the martial arts industry to the average person, that did a lot of the marketing for us as business owners. But once that all faded and the next big thing emerged, well, then we were left, that was a change for us. We were left to learn how are we going to get people to come into our schools now? How are we going to get the doors ringing and the phones ringing and the doors swinging? How are we going to do this? Well, those of us that adapted and were resilient, well, we made it through that time frame and prospered in the process as well, because we had to go through that learning curve of learning how to market again, or in some cases how to start marketing. And those who didn't do that, who didn't meet the challenges of the change that was coming, a lot of them went out of business, and the rest of them are probably still very small operations with very few students and things. And not that they're not good and great at what they do, but as far as their overall level of success and where they had envisioned themselves and envisioned their schools, probably not where they wanted to be. And that's because they resisted change, or something came along and kind of slapped them down a little bit in that department or in any other department. And that's what we're talking about today, having resilience. So I've heard this word brought up several times over the past couple of months because of the situation that I'm currently in. I have moved from Indiana, from our headquarter location, and a pretty comfortable lifestyle there, obviously, or honestly. I gotten fairly comfortable, and I could probably, have stayed there and lived out the rest of my life in relative comfort and ease. But I didn't want that to be my legacy, and that wasn't all I was looking to do. I wanted to challenge myself. I think that's one of the keys to longevity in life. Living to older ages and enjoying quality of life is having new goals set in front of you and new challenges, and so that's part of having resilience. So I've been down here trying to really start over from scratch. Bought a brand new house and starting a business from scratch in a community that I don't know anybody in, that doesn't know me, and it's been a challenge. And of course, on top of that particular side of things, just the everyday, day-to-day living, I've had problems with bicycles, problems with cars, problems with vendors, problems with dentists, and a whole slew of other things that we didn't expect to have happen. And in many cases, a lot of people, I think, they get knocked down a little bit and they choose to stay down. They just give up. And I've even said that myself in some cases. I give up. I'm tired of trying. But that's the quitter voice in me. But quickly that voice is arrested by the champion voice in me that says, hey, what are you talking about? What do you mean you're done trying? So yes, I will sit there and wallow in my pain and my misery for a few minutes, but then I'll get back up again. And that's what resilience is all about, guys. So I'm continually being reminded of this word from people around me, because I don't realize a lot of times what's going on and how my resilience is playing into or coming into play here. But it has time and time and time again. And just as an example, with the bicycle situation, we went out and bought a couple of what we thought were really nice bikes from what we thought was a really reputable person in the community, and it turned out that these bikes were probably worth about a half of what we paid for them, because we had to replace one piece after another piece after another piece. And we would go out for a bike ride, and the first thing was a flat tire. The next thing was a problem with the chain rubbing into the frame, and then the next problem was with the back wheel. The spokes in the back wheel were coming loose, and then the next time it was my wife's tire get it going flat, and the pedals breaking off, and it was just one thing after another thing after another thing. And I think many people would just say, well, forget it, I'm just not going to go biking anymore. And unfortunately, where would that lead you? You'd have a bicycle that you spent a lot of money on that you might be able to get half of what you paid for it if you decided to sell it, or it would sit in the garage and gather rust, and you'd be sitting, on your duff not doing much, not getting out into the nature and things. So that's the one possible option. So the other possible option is you just keep dealing with things as they come, and you stay resilient. You keep coming back, and every time you come back, you're stronger than before, you're wiser than before, and therefore you're more successful than you were before. So since all of those problems happened, we learned a heck of a lot about bicycling. We learned a heck of a lot about bicycles in general, the differences between them, and what kind of bicycle and tires and rims and seats that you want to have for different types of biking, and how to change a tire, how to do all these different things, and fix the brakes on the bicycle and repair things that I have never known or forgotten about since I was a child when I was riding my bicycle as an early teenager and younger. It's been a great learning experience. It's been a painful one. It's been an expensive one, but nonetheless, it's been a very beneficial one. So if something happens when I'm out on the bike trail now, I'm much more apt to be able to handle the situation because of all of the problems that we've dealt with up to this point. And so that's kind of a metaphor for anything in life. All of these things that you might be going through in your life are there to teach you lessons. So yes, you should get frustrated, and yes, you should get upset, and you should maybe cry and punch a wall or whatever you have to do in the short term, but just don't let that knock you out of the race, make sure you get back up one more time. And when you get back up, find out what you learned from that last lesson. You know, if you're in a boxing match and you get punched in the nose and you get knocked on your duff, well, the very least you can learn is, hey, that hurts, I don't like it, maybe I need to keep my hands up, or maybe I need to move a little bit more, whatever it is you picked up on. If it happens a second time and you've already kept your hands up and you moved a little bit more, then it might be that you've got to, adjust your position slightly, or you've got to become more aggressive, or whatever it is. That's what becoming or being resilient does, is it teaches you lessons and it makes you stronger, which also makes you wiser, and then in the end, you become more successful as a result of that. So that's my message for you guys today. I've got some exciting interviews coming up later in this week. We're going to be doing some bonus Success Weekly interviews with some of my friends and colleagues out in Las Vegas, which I love going out there every year to this convention where we get to do 8 hours of martial arts training and additional hours here and there, and of course other types of business training and other things, and then of course networking and just seeing old friends and things. So I'm looking forward to doing that, heading out in just a couple of days, and we're going to be staying for about 4 to 5 days out in sunny Las Vegas before we return here to sunny Florida and we get our school open. We're about 2 weeks away from getting the school open, and it's been one heck of a ride so far. We've got I think we've got about 15 students already signed up and registered before we've even opened the doors, which is very promising. And again, it goes back to the learning the marketing skills. Things have changed a lot, and that in itself is another conversation we may have in the future. But there was a time where people didn't believe you could have a customer before you were open. It's a change in mindset, and you've got to be resilient to be able to test things out and fail a little bit and to figure out how to make it work. But eventually you get to the point where, again, you have more success. And so, when I first opened my school back in 1995, when I opened the doors, it took me probably a month or two before I had any serious activity in there and any students of any number. And now here I am 20 some years later, I have 15 students that I have not met yet that have already paid and registered for our trial membership at the school, and we're 2 weeks away from being open. So that's just an example of what you can do if you learn some of the keys to success, which hopefully you're gaining through this podcast, Success Weekly. And I'll leave you with this today, guys. This is James Tharis for Success Weekly. Talk to you next week. Until then, be resilient.
That's all for this week. Tune in next week for another episode of Success Weekly. Do you have an idea you'd like James to talk about in an upcoming episode? Post your comments and be sure to share this podcast with friends.